What would you say would be the perfect world? What would you say is needed for this world to come together, Democrats and Republicans, and have us become a functioning republic operating on the same values together? What's needed?
That's a great question. And Dr. Tom, if I'm able to answer this correctly, I want to have an honorary PhD degree.
Okay.
Because that's about what it's going to take to answer that question.
And I'll give it to you.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them. But from my point of view is this. It's very simple. This, especially America, we have got to go back to God. We have got to put God back into our society.
America's founders are calling. It's your opportunity to respond. This is the Liberty Brief Podcast with your host, Robert Melso, featuring Dr. Thomas Giordano. Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Melso. Today, we have a great guest. In fact, our first guest. A true American patriot, retired U.S. Marine Gunnery Sergeant Bud Cornwell. Gunny served in the United States Marine Corps for 20 years, active. After his retirement, he served the public as a government contractor, as a GS-14, leading to his directing an IT project aimed at streamlining the VA. He shares his opinions as the host of his own podcast, The Patriot Cause. And you can find him on Rumble and other platforms, so head on over to hear his views. Don't forget to subscribe to him there as well. Also with us, of course, is my co-host, Dr. Thomas Giordano, author of the book, Unalienable, What It Really Means and Why It Matters. Today we're going to learn about Bud's life in the Marine Corps, why he retired a bit early. That's an interesting story. And the purpose he's fulfilling now with his podcast. So welcome, Bud.
Thank you very much, Robert. Pleasure to be here. Always glad to see Dr. T. God, it's been months, not a year, since we all got together. Glad to be with you.
Well, welcome to the podcast. It's exciting. Now, I'm going to ask you some questions. Tom, chime in.
Okay.
But, Gunny, you retired early, voluntarily abandoning your government pension and other benefits after 20 years of service. And as I understand it, you only had a short time before you would have been eligible for full benefits. Am I correct? Well, either you're crazy or you're independently wealthy, or maybe you're just very principled. What can I say? But don't answer that question yet. I think we can save that story.
Sure.
Until after we get some more background. I guess the first question should be, what motivated you to enlist in the Marine Corps?
That's a great question. I love answering that question, especially since it brings you back to, so I want to set this up. It's only going to take about a minute or so. I was born in Georgia at Fort Benning. 3 days later, my dad moved to Louisiana. So I grew up my whole life, teenage years, high school in Louisiana, in the middle of nowhere, running around barefooted, crawfishing, all that stuff. So you have to think about, I was in a very poor situation. So I grew up poor. But at the same time, I was part of the Explorer Scouts, and my scoutmaster was a retired U.S. Marine Corps lieutenant colonel. He did a tour in Korea, and he was at the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, and he did 2 tours in Vietnam. That is my hero. So that person is the one that drove me to join the Marine Corps when I was 18 years old. As soon as I graduated high school, I joined the Marine Corps. Now, the first couple of years I was there, I was a Marine tanker. You know what tanks are, blow stuff up. But I found that I had a few more brain cells than the other Marines that I was with. So I ended up re-enlisting the aviation electronics, and that's where I stayed for the rest of my career and did 20 years in the Marine Corps. So why did I join? I felt obligated to my country, and I felt obligated to Lieutenant Colonel Robert B. Miller, my hero, war hero, big time. And that's how I ended up going in the Marine Corps.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, and then you left the Marine Corps and you went to become a GS-14, is it?
Well, the first job I got once I retired, well, first off, I retired. I actually did 20 years, which is the minimum requirement to retire from the military at that time. So my very first job was I worked for a government contractor on the very same base, Cherry Point, North Carolina, that I retired from. That was the first thing I did, was get a job as a contractor. And then eventually, because I was military, I had, a leg up, as they call it, to get into the government civil service work. And because of the years and the time and my experience and my degrees, all that kind of stuff, I was able to basically jump right into a senior management level position. I started off as a GS-13 and eventually became a GS-14. So, however, like to answer your question, I started with the government in 2002, okay, as a government contractor. By 2014, I walked out of the job. I actually told my boss, I'm giving you a 2-week notice. I don't care if you ever find another person again. I'm gone. And I walked out the door and never looked back.
Yeah.
And you were leaving a pension behind at that, weren't you?
Yes, I was 52 years old. And the government civilian, if you're a civilian, the minimum age requirement to retire is 57. Now, let me rephrase that. The minimum age requirement to get a retirement is 57. You can leave the government, right, at a certain period, and then when you turn 57, start drawing a pension. However, my situation was different because I never really retired. I didn't have enough time to retire. So, therefore, I don't get a pension from the government. But, theoretically, I don't really need it because I have benefits from the Marine Corps retirement and, it's government benefits and all that. So, but I didn't leave because I wanted to. Trust me. I enjoyed being in the position I was in. I just didn't enjoy the environment. You have to understand, I still supported my country as a civilian, but the environment was very corrosive. Very corrosive. And it's a place in my life where I try to change my employees. I tried to get them to have some type of pride in work, everything. And when you see with your own eyes an individual getting paid $80, $90, $100,000 a year and virtually doing nothing but sitting there on the internet.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get so frustrated. And I actually tried to get rid of an employee and I couldn't do it because he's been in the VA for 15 years. Right. So that's why I left the government, because I had enough of it.
Well, I think it's about time. You were a GS-14.
Yes.
By the way, Tony Fauci is a GS.
Well, he's a SES, what is called a senior executive service person. So you go GS-14, GS-15. After 15, you become an SES. And there's different levels of SES. I was just 2 steps down from an SES. That's correct.
So you're 2 steps down from Fauci.
I'd call him an SOB, but
I like that one.
I think it's time you explained exactly what you were doing before you voluntarily resigned and abandoned your benefits and why you left.
Sure. I was the chief information officer for the VA hospital in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Prior to that, I was the deputy chief information officer for the Marine Corps Recruiting Command. So I had lots of experience at the executive level dealing with, information technology. So I get to Fayetteville, beautiful place, nice, in the mountains, wonderful place to live, nice people, all of that, right? But inside that building is just people that the way I look at it is they have been so groomed, right? They've been so groomed to just stay in your bubble, right? Now, in the medical field, what should happen is you go see a doctor or whoever, and you start talking about your issues. You make a relationship with those people, right? You joke around, and you know what I mean? You kind of, and a doctor, a lot of doctors and nurses and people do that. They want you to feel like, have a relationship.
Oh, it's very, very important, Gunny.
Yeah. In the VA hospital, these government employees treated us like numbers. I'm a freaking retired Marine veteran. And I go in there not only as working with, doing the job as the CIO, but also as a patient, right?
Right.
And these people it's like talking to a bunch of robots. All they do is ask questions. How old are you? This, that, that's it. Okay, here, go away. There's no connection whatsoever. It's corrosive.
Well,
It's just a crappy environment. And then when you walk around, you talk to the veterans that are there waiting for their appointments and stuff. It's not like just one or two of us feel it. We all felt that way. So I said, I've tried to change it. I try to do as much as I can. I'm very outspoken. I'm very loving and caring for everyone, especially people that have problems. And, I try to teach them and train them and get them motivated and, those kind of things. Didn't help.
Well, I'm guessing that there was a period where you were seeing this happen, and then something must have triggered you finally to say, that's it, I'm done. Was there a specific incident that made you make that decision finally before you walked over?
Yeah. Okay.
And handed in your resignation?
No, absolutely. So first off, this, the incident I'm going to tell you is the final needle in the haystack. I'm talking about the final. That's it. Things have been happening through the almost 2 years that I was there. Different things, right? But it eventually started adding up. Here's when I said enough was enough. A specific individual that I was in charge of, I had 27 employees. And my job was every 6 months, I had to have a evaluation on that person, right? So when I first got there, I told all my employees when they came in, I said, here's your PD performance document. I'm going to hold you to this. This is what you do. I'm going to make sure that you do this stuff. And I went over each one of those things that they're supposed to do. So I had this Air Force veteran that had been with the VA for 15 years. He wasn't a retired veteran. He was just a veteran. And he comes in, and they all know I'm a retired Marine, And he comes in there, and I start telling him about, all right, you got to do this. He was a radiology IT person, so he took care of all the radiology equipment, right? The X-ray machines, all that stuff. So I said, this is what you do. You do this. He goes, oh, nope, I don't do that. I said, well, wait a minute. It's right here. That's all he said. I said, okay, then you do this, do this. Nope, I don't do that. And I said, I'm going to hold you to what this is. He had determined what he was going to do, not what the government's telling him. All right, so
in other words, he wasn't following his job description, right?
Exactly. And they all do that. All right, so here's what happened. 6 months down the road, I noticed I was getting complaints from the radiology department that this machine ain't working, that machine ain't working, blah, whatever. And so he comes in, and I hit him. I, docked him on all those different areas that he didn't perform right. And because his score wasn't high enough, he didn't get a bonus. He's not going to get a bonus like he gets every year, right? So I had one or two employees like that. So what I did was I sent my, because I have to send them up to my boss, and he has to check them, right? Normal process. I tell you what, I didn't even hit send on the email yet, and he was on the phone. He called me like virtually right away after he read those things. He says, Bud, what are you doing? I says, what are you talking about? He says, you cannot do this to this person. He's been there for 15 years. I don't care if he's been there for 150 years. He's not doing his job, and nobody's not holding him accountable. Nobody's holding him accountable at all. This man basically threatened me. And I said, you can do whatever you want. I am not changing that evaluation whatsoever. A couple days later, guess who calls me up? The government union.
Oh, God.
You see where I'm going at with this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The government union. He says, if you don't straighten this out, we're going to go to the hospital supervisor, the president of the hospital. And I said, go right ahead. And I said, not only that, don't you ever, ever call me again. Ever. I have nothing to do with you. I could care less about you, because the way the government works, only the workers are allowed to join a union. Once you are tagged as a supervisor, you can no longer be part of the union.
Sure, you're in management then. You're in
exactly.
management.
So that's why I said, don't you ever talk to me again. I don't care who you are. I don't care if these people are in a union. It's irrelevant. I am his supervisor. Well, anyway, so that was kind of, that, but there was many other things that happened, in between there, different things and so forth. And so let me give you one more. Again, all this stuff started adding up. So I'm sitting there with the president of the hospital and all the department heads, and the manager in charge of the buildings and grounds and all that. She comes up and says, we're going to create this new contract to get solar panels put over the executive's parking lot. So we had a parking lot. It was open, and they were going to put covers on it, and then they were going to put solar panels on top of the covers. Okay, I get it. I'm fine with that. Blah, 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 right? $6 million for a small parking lot to have solar panels. I looked at this lady right in her eyes. $6 million. I looked at her and I said, whoa, back up the horses here. I have been in your hospital. I had heart issues that I thought I was having a heart attack. They kept me overnight in this hospital. I've seen the paint coming off the wall. I've seen the holes in the sheets. I've seen the disgusting smell of some of the halls in this hospital. And you're going to spend $6 million for freaking solar panels. So I'm like, I don't want to be part of this. I don't want my reputation, my name, nothing associated with the federal government, because it's just so wrong what they do. And can you imagine? That was just 2014. Imagine what it's like now.
I'm sorry you had to go through that, Gunny.
Yep.
I'm sorry. But you know what it is? It's bureaucracies. Mm-hmm. It is people spending other people's money on other people. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Their priorities are, ass backwards. Well, I know I from our little interplay with one another, I understand that you are a person of conviction, so I wouldn't have expected someone like you to stay in that environment. My own father had a similar experience on a smaller level with a school board, actually, in southern New Jersey. And he couldn't stomach it at all. So, I understand it. I understand it. So that's what motivated you to bug out. Well,
listen to this one. I had volunteered to be Santa Claus at the VA hospital because I was kind of chubby at the time, right? I said, sure, I'll do that. Get up on the stage, hand the kids, presents out to the kids and all that. So I go over and I get the Santa Claus suit. I come back to the office and I'm thinking, hey, the Friday before Christmas, the week of Christmas that we're off, right? That Friday, what I'll do is I'll put the Santa Claus suit on. I'll walk around the hospital and greet all the veterans and so forth, right? I'm like, that would be a cool idea. So I went and talked to the lady that, in charge of all of this stuff. And I said, hey, can I do this? She goes, oh, no. I said, well, why not? She goes, there's lots of different types of people in this hospital. You have Muslims, you have this. I went, wait a minute. Am I in America or not? What is the matter with you freaking people? This is America. I don't care about any other experience from any other country that comes in here. And if you do, you hate this country. I don't hate these people. I don't want their way of life infecting our way of life. And that's basically how I looked at it. This is why we're in trouble. This is why we're so messed up and divisive, is because of this situation where people are so sensitive to all these other people from all these different backgrounds. This is America. We have a culture that was developed when the country was formed. And until the last 40 or 50 years, it stood that way. And it's just slowly been destroyed in all avenues, but especially in the federal government.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I think you're speaking to something that we are all experiencing. You hear the saying, our diversity makes us strong. Well, no. That's not how it works, lady.
No.
We can be diverse, but there must be a central core belief that we all subscribe to. Otherwise, it's war.
Yep.
That's the way things work. You have balkanization if we don't have a core defining value that we share together. And I can't think of anything better than Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Think about it.
To
now,
describe
the normal process.
Value.
Yeah. The normal process to come into this country, which my mom did it. My mom's from Germany, right? I mean, she's 100% German and migrated to Germany with my dad. She had to go through a nationalization citizenship process. Well, guess what? They teach you about the core values and the beliefs of America. And you have to accept that. It's called assimilation, right? When people don't assimilate, then they assume, and here's a great example. In Fayetteville, Arkansas, first time, this was probably in 2013, give or take, I seen a car driving through downtown Fayetteville with a big Mexican flag on it. Boom boxes going off, and these are young kids flying this Mexican flag down the streets of Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I went, the world's going to hell. As soon as I seen it, I said, we are in trouble.
Yeah, now think of the stupidity of that. Think of the absolute abject stupidity of that. They run away from their country, because they don't want to live in the crap hole that they were born in. They come here and they fly the flag of the country that they escaped from that they don't want to go back to. Does that make any sense to anybody?
No. Now, let me ask you this, and a lot of people don't get this because they view the military as a protection of our country, right? So think about that for a second. They look at it as a protection to fight for our country, right? No, that is not what we're doing. That is not what we do. Listen to what I'm telling you. When we raise our hand up and join the military, we promise to support and defend what?
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States, not the people, not the president, not the Democrat Party, the Republican Party. The Constitution, which tells what? The foundation of the culture of America. So basically, all these people that are coming in here and are not following or have that function as, an American citizen to understand and live by the Constitution, I don't fight for you, and I don't care if you die. I fight for the Constitution and the people that support this country. And a lot of people look at me like, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's like, well, wait a minute. The federal government does the same thing. They say the same oath. The same oath. We have no responsibility to foreigners in this country, period.
Yeah.
End the conversation, right?
Right. Exactly. They do not have political rights.
Yes, that is correct.
They may be protected by civil rights. They may be protected by natural rights, but they do not have political rights. They have no right to participate in government. They have no right to be elected to government. They have no right to vote in that government, in our system.
Yep.
Those are things that are reserved for citizens. Okay. I don't understand these people who are trying to, well, let's put it this way, Gunny. The problem that we have is that we cannot, how can I say this, legislate virtue or morality, or a sense of obligation to our fellow citizens by even oath taking will not promote that. These things have to be within us. They have to be taught to us as children. Okay. It's not something that you could force upon somebody to be virtuous. They look at these swearing an oath as a pro forma thing that means nothing. That's the problem that we have at the governmental level.
Tom, you're getting ahead of where we're headed. If you don't mind, we're gonna get to that though.
Okay.
But I want to finish Gunny's narrative, and then we'll get to that if you don't mind.
Okay.
You leave, Gunny. You're gone. You walk out. You hand in your resignation. You're sitting in your basement, or whatever it is you do.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you start this podcast called The Patriot Cause. Am I right?
Right. Well, I didn't start the podcast until 2020. So after I left the federal government, I actually got a job with a company called Forrester Research, and I was a CIO advisor. Big organizations like the World Bank, I was their CIO advisor. All different types of companies, and like, for instance, like the Navy supply system, the big, huge Navy supply, I was their CIO advisor. So, but then they wanted me to move to Washington, D.C. from Fayetteville, Arkansas, and I said, ain't going to happen. I'll fly there and visit, the customers every once in a while, but normally it's just a phone call once a month that you meet up with your client. So I did that. Now, what I wanted to add to what you're talking about here, Robert, is this. So let's go back real quick. I'm in the Marine Corps, and inside of that institution is nothing but the United States of America, Marines, hoorah, tough, baddest people on the face of the planet. So think about that first. So I had to leave that environment and go into the civilian world where it's completely different, right?
Culture shock.
Complete culture shock. So you're talking about all those Marines, we could rag each other, we can talk about whatever, but it all came down to the same thing. We're all together. We all support each other. We got each other's back. It's an absolute one of the greatest environments ever created on the planet. Is the military environment, and unless you've been there and seen it. So during that time frame, I learned a lot of stuff. I was trained for non-commissioned officer stuff, leadership stuff. Stuff that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the civilian world. And here's one thing I was taught. I was taught communism. I was taught how to recognize it. What is it? Why does it exist? Because we have to fight it. We fought communist countries, and we're going to do it again, right? So think about this. What is the best way to learn about communism? Saul Zelensky.
Yeah.
8 Steps for Radicals, right? Remember that?
Right.
Rules for radicals.
Rules for Radicals, right. I read that when I was a Marine. Well, guess what? Go read it today. And tell me if this is not happening right here in our country. Every single one of those things that they're doing it right here.
Yeah.
That's why I had to leave the government, because the government is doing it. The government is doing that. Think about it. It's insanity. So I started my podcast in 2020 based on that principle. So now I have two things. I have what it's like to be a true American with my experience in the military and so forth, my raising up. And then over here, I have the exact opposite, people that want to take this down. So I said, I need to educate as many people, especially veterans, as possible on what is actually happening. Remember, Trump's still in office, but I see it coming. I see it, even when he was there, I still seen it coming. So that's why I started the podcast, The Patriot Cause. That's my cause, right? And by the way, the podcast is doing pretty darn good.
Yeah, and we're going to direct people to it as best as we can, Gunny.
I appreciate that.
You know, a part of you, as I see it, is your faith.
Yes.
And I think you talk about it in your podcast a lot. But how much does your faith inform your political view? Let me give you a little bit easier question to answer. Tom and I did a podcast about God. Just God. And the questions we were asking is, if you don't believe in God, what do you believe in? Well, if you don't believe in God, then there is no creator.
Yep.
There is no moral grounding. There's no ultimate right or wrong. Everything is relative. There's no absolute evil, no absolute good. Without God, you have no moral standing to do anything, and there's no absolute truth.
Yep. Okay.
And it seems to me, and Tom and I discussed this, that without God, we're rudderless. And when we find out that things that we believed are untrue, we're left questioning ourselves. Why has truth eluded us once again? And we discovered that it's all because there is no moral grounding. There's no absolute truth. And without that, what can bring us together? So
I mean,
having said that,
yep, I got
like
you now.
your view on that.
Oh, yeah. All right. I'm going to just give you a Bible verse that explains it. Romans 13:1. What that is, God selects the governments. He ordains them. He approves of it. He makes it happen. I want you to think about it. It's in the Bible. It tells them that. So we are to submit ourselves to the government, right? Doesn't mean we have to agree to it. So the point I'm making, how does my faith affect politics, right? Even though politics, especially today, is all messed up, right? It's what God's plan is. This is what he's planned. This is how he did it. This is what he wants to happen. There's a reason behind it. So my faith is I believe in God. I believe in what you're saying, the truth. And Robert, when you describe all the things that you're talking about without God, there's only one word all you need is one word to explain that. It's called hell. That's what hell is going to be. Exactly what Robert's talking about. It's going to be never ending like that. There's no outcome, no forward thinking. It's constant. The stuff that we're dealing with. And so my faith is I have to believe that there's a reason that the people that are elected politically wise are in our Congress, that are presidents, or even local, right? And always think that the best way to explain it, God uses both good and bad for a good purpose. He uses bad stuff happening that will eventually lead to a righteous purpose. Sometimes we can't see that, but just like a relationship, an individual relationship with Christ, like myself, I know he puts stuff on me to hone me, like he does the sword, to making it sharper, to make me, point myself more towards him. So having faith is believing that whatever is in front of you, God ordains it and it happens. Now, people have, which I like, we have the free will to do stuff, right? But God already knows that this is going to happen. He just allows us to do it. We chose it, and he says, okay, that's what you want to do, go do it. So my faith is very strong as it relates to talking about politics and the podcasts, and because the true communists, Robert, is exactly the person you're talking about. They have no God. They don't worship anything but themselves and their power. And they're corrupt. Now, last thing on this real quick. The Epoch Times put out a video series called The Specter of Communism. You've got to watch it or get the book. And it goes in detail from the beginning of communism, when it started back in the 1850s and so forth. And then, of course, eventually Russia with, what's his name? Lenin, right? Lenin. Yep. And those guys. And so I watched that a month before I started the podcast. I watched the whole 9-series video. And brothers, let me tell you something. By the time I was done, I was crying. I had tears coming from my eyes because I realized there are going to be millions of people that are going to die trying to fight this evil. There's millions of people have already died in China and Russia. This is exactly what Satan is. It's a perfect example. If you want to physically see and understand who Satan is, just watch what communists do. And that's the faith part of it,
So you start the Patriot Cause?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
No, I was going to say, Lenin himself said that in order to get their desires accomplished, there would be an ocean of blood.
Absolutely.
And, it's not that they're not replacing God with anything, Gunny. They're replacing God with Karl Marx and the Bible with the Communist Manifesto. That's their religion. It has all of the aspects of a religion, but they're godless.
I'm reminded, Tom, of a quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Yep. I know what you're going to say.
When he said, someone asked him, what was the cause for all the death and the gulags and the millions murdered, tortured, starved? And he said quite clearly, we thought we could get rid of God.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Now, here's the weird part, right? Is Stalin, did you know Stalin went to a theology school? Seminary? Did you know that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But think about how ridiculous that is. And you're thinking about it, It's crazy. And, of course, Karl Marx, the same thing. He grew up in a religious environment.
His uncle was a rabbi.
Satan is powerful, folks. He's huge. And, by the way, and believe me, Satan duplicates virtually everything that Christ does. But he does it from an evil perspective.
All right. So with that in mind, let's get to your opinions on the current conditions of politicians. As we speak here today, it's March 5th, 2025. We just saw Trump's speech to the Joint Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And when we look out over that dais and we saw Democrats and Republicans in their respective sides, I saw a lot of Democrats sitting on their hands for things that you could not possibly want to not cheer for. Lincoln Riley's murderer caught. That young boy who had fought cancer, that 13-year-old boy. Other folks there mentioned, I can't remember all of them, but they sat through all of that without even acknowledging or cheering the obvious good that was there in that room, the good things that happened. And I can't help but look at that and think to myself, how decrepit is that? I mean, I can understand you're disagreeing with the president.
Absolutely.
Do you have to sit there when these people are acknowledged? And it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Actually, it makes a lot of sense to me, and I'll explain to you why. As far as the politics go, and before we really get into the detail on this real quick, I want you to think about something. I want to be optimistic now because of the change, Trump winning, landslide, all that stuff. And then you got, the DOGE, all these things that are working, the new attorney general starting to, investigate people, etc. But I'm sorry, from a political standpoint, I'm from Missouri. In other words, the show me state.
Yeah.
Until this organization, this administration shows me exactly taking care of and holding people accountable, I'm not going to be optimistic about it. But however, as far as what you're talking about that happened, it doesn't surprise me. The Democrat Party has been taken over by the communist view of life. And what I mean by that is, and the Democrats have actually been like this for years. They've just gotten a lot worse. They're group minded, right? They're like people that believe in a group, the power of a group of people. So if you kind of want a tendency to, to not be part of that group, then they're going to look down on you, and you're going to have consequences behind that. So I look at it as blackmail. In other words, a Democrat can no longer think for themselves. They have to think groupthink. So the Trump deranged syndrome is so ingrained in these people by the leaders of the Democrat Party that they're telling them, don't respond at all whatsoever. Don't even talk to these people. They're evil people. So this is how they're acting. And, Maxine Waters is a great example of that. Remember that speech she gave outside of D.C.? Don't ever talk to these people, run them out of the restaurants.
Get in their face and all that, yeah.
It's never ending. So political-wise, I want to be optimistic. I do. I really want our country to get back, especially as, our military gets strengthened back up again, which I love Pete Hegseth. What a perfect person to put in there. He's not a politician. He's not, he's just perfect. That's all I got to say. He's a combat veteran. He was never a general, never up there in the high thing. So political-wise, I think we're going to improve. But again, I would really like to see some things happen to hold people accountable to help correct our country.
What would you say would be the perfect world? What would you say is needed for this world to come together, Democrats and Republicans, and have us become a functioning republic operating on the same values together? What's needed?
That's a great question. And Dr. Tom, if I'm able to answer this correctly, I want to have an honorary PhD degree.
Okay.
Because that's about what it's going to take to answer that question.
And I'll give it to you.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them. But from my point of view is this. It's very simple. This, especially America, we have got to go back to God. We have got to put God back into our society, back into our decisions, back into what we do as a country. And that spreads across the world. Most people don't know it, but America sends more missionary people across this globe than any other country or combination of countries.
Right.
Because we do that because we care about the world also. not just America. But if our backyard is getting dirty, right, it needs to be cleaned up. And that's the first thing that we need to do is we need to get Christian leaders back into these positions in the government, positions in, local, federal, state, everywhere, and start standing by the principles of what God has given us, the God-given rights, which are being trampled on every day by millions of people all over the world. Human rights belong to everybody, not just America. That's what we got to do.
I think you're talking about Judeo-Christian people, people with Judeo-Christian values.
That is correct.
Absolutely.
Yes, that is correct. Absolutely. I'm sorry. That is absolutely correct. Now, let me put it this way. I have met Muslims. I've been in the military with Muslims, and I've talked to them about their religion and so forth. As long as they're not radicalized, then I believe their society does good, because the ones that I have met, they believe in God, they worship God, and they have great values to themselves, right? Great character, right? But these radical ones, being a radical Muslim, like the Sharia law thing, those kind of things, that needs to be defeated. And it's coming into England and France and places like that. And if it's not reversed, it's going to get worse. And it's going to get harder and harder and harder to get the world united because, so many of these people are going to be on one side or the other. I'm a Judeo-Christian, obviously, but I don't hate Muslims. I don't hate the fact that they worship what I would consider a different God, but at least they worship a God, and at least they have some kind of structure to them, family values, etc. That's what we've lost around the world. We're talking about just the other day in, I think it was in the Congo or somewhere like that. There were 70 Christians that were beheaded by Muslims, right? For God's sakes, is it that bad? That's the only way I can say it, the only way I can put it.
I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, and I'll tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
Recent polls are suggesting that for the first time in the 80-year history of tracking religion, less than half of families are affiliated with a church or a synagogue or some other place of worship. Even as far back as, say, 2010, I think it was 70%. I'm not sure on that. But there's been a precipitous drop, and we see it in my church.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think in all other churches and synagogues around the country. Now, you can be religious without being affiliated with a church, but my God, your family, if you're not getting them some religious education, where are you?
Exactly.
Where are the future kids? What are they going to be like?
Well, it's like my son, he graduated Virginia Tech, and he was, his mind was infiltrated with all this liberalism. And, well, I don't like to use the word liberalism because true liberalism is liberty, right? I mean, that's where it came from. The sickness the sickness these people have. And so he comes out of there. This is a great, great story. He comes out of there, and my wife and I are visiting him and his wife and the kids. And I'm in the kitchen on the computer talking about the Constitution with some people. My son walks in there and he says, "Dad, I don't even know why you talk about that. That is nothing but a worthless piece of paper." I was leveled. Now get this. My son had just finished his 6-year reserve term in the Marine Corps. And he was talking this way. Now, but God is God. Now he's totally different. Now he has 4 children, They go to church all the time. His kids are homeschooled, and he hates the federal government. I'm like, what happened here? You know, I think what it is I didn't give up on him. I kept telling him what the truth is. And we started having these conversations, and he started doing research, and he was reading, you know, he read the Quran, he read all these different Buddha books, and, you know, and then he started reading the Bible, and then he started getting it. He's like, this is truth. The Bible is truth. So his whole world's changed, and he's exactly what can be done with any family in America. Same thing. That's what we need more of.
Yeah.
And of course, we need to have our churches understand that you must be involved in the government. You must be involved in voting. It's all part of your job.
I believe Article 5, Convention of the States, is still a viable way for us to have an effect on the Constitution. And I'm praying that a lot of the stuff that we're concerned about will be addressed by the new Trump administration. It looks like it's going that way, hopefully. But I believe, if you would listen to the last podcast that we've done, like I said there, I hope it's not just putting a fresh coat of paint on a house that has a crumbling foundation. The problem that we have is that we now have a fourth branch of government called the administrative state, or the bureaucracy. And this is in stark contradiction to the Constitution, which is devised as a tripartite. You know, there's three branches. There's no fourth branch. And the reason for that was that the federal government was never supposed to have police powers. That is, powers to write policy for domestic policy. The federal government was designed only for foreign policy. Now, I believe that, number one, the very first thing that we should do is abolish the 17th Amendment and put the senators back in the hands of the state assemblies, number one. And then we've got to dismantle this state, this administrative state. I wonder what your views are on that, number one. And I just wanted to hear your views on, on Pam Bondi, on Kash Patel, on Dan Bongino. You know, I wanted to hear your views on Trump's his cabinet picks.
Yep. Well, we'll have to do another podcast, because I got a lot to say about that.
How about if you just answer the first question? The first question, which is, do you think this is a fresh coat of paint, or do you think this can have a lasting effect?
Unfortunately, it's been proven you can't make lasting changes in 4 years. I hate to say that, but it is true. You can make changes, but a lot of times those changes, especially from the executive branch, don't stick.
Yep.
The character of the individuals need to be changed, and firing them and hiring whatever, it's all part of it. But I'm talking about the character of the politicians that get elected. That needs to be constantly worked on. So to answer your question, if J.D. Vance ends up being the president the next 4 years, and then the president the next 4 years, you're talking 12 years of conservative values being influenced into the country and controlling our immigration, which we're doing a great job of. So the bottom line is that's the key.
That doesn't guarantee he's got a Senate behind it.
That's true. I understand, but
with a House.
Yep. But the executive branch of this organization is the most screwed up of the three. It is so bloated. The government is so bloated. When you're talking about trillions and trillions and trillions of wasteful dollars, how are you ever going to get a country back on track without fixing the executive branch? That's going to take years. Now, you can vote people in and out of Congress. So we can change that by changing the mindset of the people to vote for the right people to go in, et cetera, right? But the executive branch has to be done by that executive leadership that comes in through that election process, and they got to hit this freaking executive branch hard. Number one, If somebody asks me what is the number one thing that needs to happen, the Department of Education needs to be removed, done, out, gone. Because guess what? A lot of the reason that the problems that we have in our country is because of the education that our kids have received by this communist government.
Oh, absolutely. 100% in agreement.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's no question. We did entire podcast on it, Gunny. We know exactly what you're talking about. 100% agreement. You know,
yeah, if you were listening, you'd have known that.
Yeah, Gunny. we went through the entire history of the Department of Education. We did.
We sure did.
And how it was infiltrated by postmodernism and all that other crap.
What's number two?
Yeah, so number two, I would have to agree with Dr. Tom, is the 17th Amendment has to be removed.
Right.
That would be my chopping block right there. Education gone. You know, get rid of the 17th Amendment.
Right.
Of course, Congress will never do that.
What about term limits?
Oh, well, term limits is all part of Article 5. Article 5, like we're talking about, it's all encompassing. You got term limits. You got limit the size and scope of the federal government, which Trump is doing right now, exactly what we're talking about. And the third one is balancing the budget of the government. Oh, here's a good question for both of you.
We wouldn't need an Article 5 so much if the 17th Amendment was abolished, because we could recall these people, at least in the Senate, as often as we wanted to.
Yep.
How long are congressional terms? What are they?
The House is 2 years and Senate is 6 years.
So there you go. So you have 2 years to kick somebody else out.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. When was the last time that the federal government budget was balanced? I'm not talking about the deficit being reduced. I'm talking about the budget was actually balanced.
Andrew Jackson.
Well, some people would say it's under Clinton, but I'm not sure if it was balanced even then.
Andrew Jackson.
That's right. The true answer to that question is Andrew Jackson.
Absolutely.
Even though Clinton claims it, right? And then I read something the other day. This is all part of what we're talking about. You know, apparently when Clinton came in, he eliminated 300,000 government positions. I don't know if that's true or not. I have to do some research to figure it out, but it doesn't make sense to me. You know, but that's how we got to do it. Trump is doing what needs to be done. I'm telling you, he is. Kick these people out, grab your box, grab your little pictures off of your desk, and get the hell out of this building, because I'm going to burn the building down.
Absolutely. And if you remember, under Andrew Jackson, do you know how many senators were fired that were forced to resign because they voted against the wishes of their states' assemblies for the creation of the Second American Bank in that fight between Jackson and Nicholas Biddle in Philadelphia?
Yeah.
You know, so that's what we mean. When that was taken away, our republic was dissolved because the states no longer had representation at the federal level. And on top of it, it opened up the Senate to corruption on more than a state level. So
that's a fact.
You know,
I know, Robert, I know we're getting down to the wire here, but I want to add one more thing here to make sure I get it in. So you're asking me about faith, and I think it's very important to understand how a person actually came to faith. Because you could grow up as a kid, go to church, and, you know, in other words, all the ways to come to Christ are good ways. It doesn't matter which way, as long as you do. But here's what happened to me. So I lead the federal government. I get that job in 2015 with Forrester Research. Then they wanted me to move to Washington, D.C., and I said, hell no. So they said, okay, you got 2 months to move to D.C. or we're going to let you go. I said, okay. So I was out chopping wood in the forest with my dogs, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a job. I had bills to pay. I mean, I was used to that, $160,000, $170,000 salary a year, right? And so I was just lost. So I actually got down on my knees in the woods and I prayed, God, you got to help me. I'm at the end. I'm at the end of my rope. I don't care if I dig ditches or don't. You got to tell me what to do. I get back in my side-by-side with my dogs in the woods, and I go up, and I have to cross this field, and it has this gate, and I go stop, and I go to open the gate. As soon as I grab the gate to open it, I hear this real loud trumpet sound. You know, like the Jewish trumpets that you see on a lot of the movies. I mean, I heard it. I mean, it was just like I'm looking up in the sky, and I'm like, okay. And then I heard another one. And I know the difference between a tractor truck and all that stuff. Plus, I wasn't nowhere near freeway or any of that stuff. But I heard these two trumpets, and I'm like, okay, I don't know, whatever. Open the gate, drive the vehicle through, close the gate. I go back, I open the door, I sit down inside of the side-by-side, and all of a sudden, this massive calmness just took over my body. Just total calmness.
You had an epiphany.
And I looked at my dogs and I said, you know what? Everything's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. Now, I had started listening to podcasts, Dr. Boyce and all that, but he brought me to my knees that day. Guess what happened, Robert? 2 weeks later, I went up to my wife and I said, I'm going to be a minister. And I got a degree, and I started preaching in church.
That's great. That is
a great story, Gunny.
That's
a
story.
Great story. That's great. That is great. Come to Jesus moment.
Yep. That's it. That's my what's it called? Your
epiphany. It was an epiphany.
No, they got there's another word they use. I'll think of it here.
Yeah, at midnight. It'll come to you at midnight when you put your head on the pillow.
Your testimony. That's my testimony.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So that's what a lot of Christians say. Well, what's your testimony? Well, raise your right hand.
Well, can I recount mine to you?
Oh, absolutely.
I was working in a car and truck rental agency in Hackensack, New Jersey. It was the middle of winter.
Ooh.
I had my wife and I were separated. I had nowhere to go. I was in school studying to get my first degree, and I asked the boss of this agency if I could sleep in a cot, an army cot, in a loft above the truck garage. No heat. We had a corrugated tin roof over this garage. So I'm lying there between engine and transmission parts with a pneumonitis. I had a bronchitis. I was dying. In that cot. And I had this epiphany. I had a high fever. I couldn't breathe. I had an epiphany that I was precisely where I put myself. That, rather than look for causes and everything, it was me that caused that. And from that point, I had that same sense of calm that you did.
You know what, Tom? I think you told me the story before. I really do.
So
I think we mentioned it before. But yeah, that's what it is. You know in your heart when you're, and I love the word that they use. You have been converted. You have been converted from a person that lives in this world and deals with the world. And now you're a person that lives for God, and you can see. Your eyes have been opened and you can see the world now. You can see how corrupt the world is that you were living in before you got converted.
Right.
Before we go, can you tell people where they can find you, your podcast, and hopefully we can get some more subscribers for you?
I really appreciate that, Robert. You can find me on the Patriot Cause. I have a website, patriotcause.com. You can go there. You can listen to the podcast there. I also have a video of a person, they call him the flag shirt man, right? And he does a Now get this. I'm not lying when I tell you this. He has 8 million followers that watch this video every week. And he's got a whole bunch of people, including people like, what's his name? The General Mike
Flynn.
Mike Flynn, all of those people, a bunch of them, big hitters.
Great guy.
And every week they have this election integrity. It's on my website, thepatriotcause.com. And like I said, people all over the world are watching this election integrity issue that we're dealing with. He's got all these people in all these different parts of each state. It's really awesome. And also, so I'm on social media, Getter, X, Truth
Rumble.
Social, and of course,
Right.
Rumble. You're either going to find me as the Gunny or you're going to find me as Minuteman Bud, one of those two. But you can always go to my website, patriotcause.com, and get more information there.
All right. Very good. Very good.
And for those that are listening, if you want to send me an email, by all means just do Gunny at thepatriotcause.com. Gunny at thepatriotcause.com, and I will do the best I can to reply back and go from there.
Gunny,
Yes, sir.
Gunny, God bless you. That's all I got to say. God bless you. God bless the Marine Corps.
Absolutely, sir.
God bless our country.
Tom, I don't want to get out of this world till I go get to meet you and Robert. It'd be awesome. So let me know if you ever come back to the States. I'll do everything I can to get to you.
Yeah, we'll get
together, Gunny. Thank you so much.
That. I would love that. I'd love to give you a hug. You know, like I said, Gunny,
You bet. Same here.
When I think of an American patriot, as I was saying to you earlier before we started the podcast, when I think of an American patriot, a true American patriot, the avatar that I have is of you. And I had that avatar before I even met you.
I appreciate that.
You know, that you are what my representation of a true patriotic American would be. And it's difficult to try to explain this to people over here in Europe. They just don't understand. However, I must say that that Giorgia Meloni sided with Trump in this Ukrainian thing. I am not going to send Italian soldiers to go fight in Ukraine. Will not happen. So, you know, we're getting through. We got Viktor Orban. Good. We've got Meloni. We've got.
I want to mention this. We are at a point of World War III like we've never been before. After what happened with Zelensky and Trump in that office, made a huge impact on how sensitive this situation is.
Right.
And here's what I'm telling you. If America decides not to support the Ukraine with weapons and whatever it is, we have an option to help do what we can to protect America. And then what that option is we have got to get out of NATO.
Absolutely.
Because what's going to happen is if England or any of these other countries start sending troops into Ukraine, Russia is going to launch nuclear weapons. Read my lips. They will start.
Hey, listen, Macron already said that they're trying to work out a nuclear weapon arsenal with them and England, France and England. These people are stupid. They are absolutely stupid. What they are going to do, I predict this. What they're going to do is they're going to force the United States and Russia to unite against the stupidity of Europe. Nobody wants a third world war. What are these people driving us to? And for what? Anyway, no, you're absolutely right, Gunny. I've been watching this very closely because I'm sitting here in Europe. You know, these people, they've never changed a tire in their lives, and they want to direct their countries into sending troops to go against the Russians. Don't they remember history?
Yeah, it's crazy. People are crazy.
They're nuts. Anyway, you're right. I agree. I agree, Gunny.
Again, Dr. T and Robert, thank you so much for your time. And I tell everybody in Italy, Tom, I pray for them all the time. I do pray for France, Europe, and so forth.
Well, you know, this has been terrific, Gunny.
Thank you very much, Robert.
You've been listening to The Liberty Brief, based on the book Unalienable, What It Really Means and Why It Matters by Dr. Thomas Giordano. If you want to help spread the word, please subscribe, like, and share using the links below. You can also check out Dr. Giordano's book on Amazon using the links as well.